Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. Once again, we are back with the bees and I have a few plans for today's episode. I have been spending the weekend working with these guys and I already have a better design for a honey farm than the one we have down here. Hey, activating elytra like that still works super well. Anyway, these guys down here could be put in a much more compact space. We have a tileable design for the honey farm now, and this is still kind of adorable, so I'm not going to change this one right away. We might end up building another one somewhere else, but for now I'm going to collect the honey from this, and then I think the honey farm upstairs, which has been producing a little bit of honey, but now this one is about 4 times as fast as the one that we have up here. I think we're going to turn this into a honeycomb farm instead, because honeycomb will produce like 3 pieces of honeycomb per beehive, which will ultimately mean that you can produce it a little bit faster than you can produce honey blocks, which require 4 bottles just to make a single honey block. And by the way, I have a bunch of these now, so we're going to get to do a little bit of stuff with them in the near future. I think I have a shulker box on me. Yes, there we go. So if I open this up, you can see I have nearly 2 full stacks of honey blocks now, and if we have a few bottles in here as well, yeah, we've got enough for another 8 blocks there, maybe. Yes, I think that should be fine. We get all of the glass bottles back, and some people had voiced their concerns about not being able to refill the glass bottles in this design. Don't worry, new design will take care of that, and I'll be showing you that a little bit later in the week, I think. For now, though, we're going to redesign this room a little bit to produce honey, honeycomb rather, instead of bottles of honey, and the farm down here is going to stay as the main honey production area for the time being, because bees are frankly adorable and I like having them in this kind of open social space that they have right now, even if it's not the most efficient way of doing things. But look, they're already producing more honey for me. This is fantastic. I like having a nice even amount of it so that I can produce a nice even amount of honey blocks and just have the glass bottles left over. For now, though, there are 512 glass bottles in each of these dispensers, which is going to take a good while for them to deplete. I figured that out. If they're producing a honey bottle maybe every 3 minutes or so, because there are 3 bees per hive, they have to go in and come back out twice in order to produce a honey bottle. That's going to mean that they take about 25 hours of in-game time in order to completely deplete all of the bottles in those dispensers. So that's going to be a little while before we actually need to refill the glass bottles, and the redesign, if I can freaking get up this ladder, excuse you, hello, there we go. So the redesign will completely take care of that, and we will have a means to constantly restock the glass bottles through a hopper with a chest attached. Just means a little bit of a redesign of the farm. So I thought what I could do instead is take you guys through the trial and error process of developing a farm like this when mechanics like this are added to the game. And a lot of the time it will take place in a creative test world, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be showing you the testing process in survival, or at least the kind of troubleshooting process, the process by which I figure out exactly what I want to do with a farm and how each of the mechanics are going to work. We are going to have to take down these hives at some point, and I might have to do that while it is nighttime. So you know what? I think I might take the bees now while I can, and hopefully nobody is going to get mad that I'm removing these hives. Looks like we're in the clear. Okay, each of those hives has 3 bees in, so I had to be a little bit careful that I wasn't going to break a hive and then a bee was out on the surface and would get mad. But those hives can go in this chest for the time being, and there are a few glass bottles in there left over as well. So I'm going to take apart this section of the room, and when we come back, I'm going to show you the step-by-step trial and error process it takes to design your very own honeycomb farm. Hey folks, welcome back. So I've come out here to another nice open space, a redstone testing area. Recently we built the note block stuff over here, and I decided to set this up so that we could go through the process of designing a honeycomb farm together. And I've already kind of figured out how to do this in creative mode, and it's the kind of thing that once you have a bit more experience with this stuff, you can puzzle through it. But I thought to some people who might not be that familiar with redstone or designing farms like this, or just working with game mechanics in this way in general, it might be fun to go through the process of designing a farm like this step by step. So that's what we're going to do. Starting off with actually getting the beehives because apparently I left those somewhere. There we go, left them in a shulker box. Knew I had some somewhere. So we've got the shulker box here, we've got our 4 beehives in here, and they each have some bees inside them, meaning that when we place them down out here, we'll be able to get those bees to pop out. Now, we know already that to get honeycomb manually from a beehive, it needs to have a campfire providing smoke particles underneath it. So I'm going to place a campfire down here. We got the smoke rising up like that. We need 1 air block and we can place a beehive there. The bees will of course need some flowers around here so that they can get some pollen, return to the hive, and produce honey. So I'm going to wait a little while for them to do that, and eventually we should have a full honey level inside of this beehive. Okay, the bees have popped out of the hive, and now we have a full hive of honey. We're actually at honey level 5 right now, which means it's ready to be harvested either in a bottle or using shears to get honeycomb. And we need to right-click on the hive to get the honeycomb using shears, and watch what happens to the honeycomb items when they pop out of the hive. They actually show a little bit there that they are sort of darkened, and then they pop out in a variety of directions. One usually pops up to the top, the others kind of pop out to the side, but that is not a reliable thing to count on. You cannot count on them being spat out of the block in a specific direction. What's actually happening there is that the items themselves are spawning inside the block, and then Minecraft is saying, hang on, these items shouldn't be occupying the same space as a solid block, and it's kind of pushing them out in whatever direction they happen to be able to go. They couldn't go behind it because there is a glass wall here, so they go in a variety of directions to either side, and that is dictated slightly randomly each time, so it's not something you can necessarily count on. We couldn't put a hopper in front of the hive and guarantee that all the honeycomb would end up in there, not to mention the fact that some of it is clearly getting pushed up to the top. From what we know about item entities, placing a block on top of the hive won't really make much of a difference either, as item entities tend to glitch upwards if they get stuck in blocks primarily. So I guess we could do some sort of system where we block off all sides of the hive, except the bees need the front of the hive to be open in order to enter into it in the first place. So we are limited in the options for what we can do there. But that tells me a few different things about what we are going to have to do to collect the honeycomb. We could try placing a hopper underneath the hive so that when it becomes full, I don't have any hoppers right now, but I will go and get one, so that when it becomes full, if those item entities occupy this space inside of here for a second or two, they might actually be able to get pulled in by a hopper. So let's go and get a hopper and try that out. Okay, while the bees are producing some more honey inside of there, I'm going to place the hopper down here, and I'm fairly certain the bottles of honey won't immediately get stuck in the campfire, but of course this creates a problem where I'm not certain that the smoke particles are still reaching the hive. The hive is seeing some smoke particles rise up through the top, but I don't know if that's something we can rely on. So this seems like it's not going to be the ideal solution for harvesting manually. However, we already know from our previous experiences with honey farms that using a dispenser on a full hive of honey means that the bees will not get angry even if there are no smoke particles present. So what we're also going to do is remove this block at the back here and put in a dispenser, which will just put a simple wood block there, and then we can activate that using a button that will trigger the dispenser. And into the dispenser, we are going to place some shears. So we'll be able to shear this hive automatically in much the same way that we can shear sheep automatically using a dispenser, in much the same way as a dispenser with empty bottles can be used to collect honey from the hive. So now that our hive is filled with honey, the bees are buzzing around it, and I think we can give this a try. Let's shear it using the button, and we'll notice a couple of things happened there. For a start, I think one honeycomb did end up inside the hopper because it was low enough in the block space for it to get picked up by the hopper. It glitched downwards through the block instead of out of the side. However, we did see one honeycomb there and one honeycomb there get spat out of the top and side of the block in sort of random directions. So it looks like just picking it up using a hopper will not be adequate for our collection method, because the hopper is not going to be able to get them every single time. And typically, that's an assumption I would make automatically because we know for a fact... Oh, the hopper just picked that up. Yeah, we know for a fact that hoppers cannot collect items through solid blocks. So even if I put a glass block here, and I'll pillar up using some scaffolding here so that I can drop an item in at the top. If I drop, say, this block of yellow terracotta on top of here, it's not going to get collected by the hopper because the hopper needs something other than a solid block over the top of it to be able to pull items through. If this were a slab, on the other hand, the hopper would be able to pull items through it because they would be within the hopper's pickup range. But unfortunately, since beehives are a solid block, that's kind of out of the question with this setup. Instead, we're going to use something a little bit different. We're going to use a hopper minecart. And at this point, I can douse the campfire, and we won't need to use that at all. Can collect that back up, and let's get some sleep for the night. The hopper minecart is going to be the next thing we will try because hopper minecarts are able to pick up items through solid blocks if they are boosted a little bit by a rail. For example, here, if we put the hopper minecart there, we can put down a block on top of that, if I can actually build up over the top of it, like so, there we go. And if I place items on top of this block now, they are going to get pulled through it by the minecart hopper. And we have used this in several farms before, so this is something that people are going to be familiar with. But now if I throw this piece of black concrete on there, it disappears instantly, and you'll find it ends up in the minecart hopper, and that is because the minecart hopper is being pushed up into this block. It's not quite going to show that way with its hitbox, but it can actually drag items through this block a little bit. Now, if I take the rail out from underneath here, I don't think it's going to work exactly the same. No, because the hopper minecart is not being boosted up by the rail below it, so the pickup range of the minecart hopper doesn't quite interact with the top of this block. So one of our options here is to have a hopper minecart on a rail underneath one of our beehives, and then every time it gets sheared, hopefully we will end up with all of the honeycomb getting picked up through the hive block itself. If it lands on the top there, it's going to get picked up. If it ends up glitched halfway into the block and spat out in all directions, it's probably going to be low enough for the hopper minecart to pick it up quite quickly. So let's give that a try. We'll place down one of our beehives, wait for the bees to gather some honey, and then shear it and see what happens. Okay, our honey level is back up to 5. The shears are in the dispenser. We have a hopper minecart below. Let's give this a try. There we go. Did you see that? It was very brief. You saw all of the items pop out of here, but they were all immediately collected up by the hopper minecart, which means we get 3 honeycomb there instantly. After that, of course, we could be placing the hopper minecart on top of a hopper, which could output to a chest, and then we would have all of the honeycomb pulled out of the hopper minecart and collected in a place that the player could easily pick it up later. The next challenge is to find a way for this to happen automatically without the player input of pushing a button, and that's where the magic of redstone comes in. We're going to figure out a way to automate it using the block state changes that the hive goes through when it is producing honey. We've already done this with the honey farm over there, but this time we're going to figure out a way that is compatible with harvesting honeycomb. Okay, so just so this is at a sensible height, I'm going to bury the chest in the ground here, and we're going to have the hopper pushed into the side of it like so. We're going to make a hopper minecart to go on top of that, because that's the way we know we're going to be collecting our honey. And I'll probably put some blocks around the outside here. Let's put some of this black concrete around there, just so this minecart doesn't move around at all in case we happen to nudge it from the side, because while they're on rails, of course, they can be moved around quite freely, and that might get a little bit annoying. Let's put one more block up the back here, like so, and we'll place one of our beehives over the top of that. Now, that one's actually already full of honey, which is great for this example. Now, we should be able to get a dispenser into the back of this. Let's put it there, and that one can have the shears in. And now we have to figure out how we're going to activate this automatically when the state of the hive changes. There are a couple of ways we can do this. One of the ways we've already been using over in the honey farm is to measure the honey level of the hive using a comparator, and by doing that we can get a comparator output, which is going to be a variable signal that will increase as the honey level of the hive increases. So now that is going to output a power level of 5. If we put the redstone dust down there, it's going to be power 5, and that is going to basically detect the level of the honey in the hive. Once it reaches 5, we could have it wrap around into a block next to this dispenser. The dispenser would fire the shears once it reached honey level 5, and that would basically harvest the honeycomb as it was doing before and as it's done with the honey. However, that is kind of overkill because there is another way that we can measure the level of honey in the hive, or at least measure when the honey level of the hive increases, and that is by using an observer. Observers are really useful for this kind of thing because they will be able to detect state changes in a block and output one brief redstone signal, which is really all we need to activate the dispenser here. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to activate the dispenser manually to shear the hive. We don't have a campfire underneath it, so I can't really shear it manually, but watch the redstone output of this observer when the state of this changes from having a honey level of 5 to a honey level of 0. Bam, there you go. It flashes once, which means it's putting out a single redstone output. And it looks like we got some honey flung out to the side there. Some honeycomb actually didn't end up in the hopper, so that's a concern. That's something we will have to deal with in a second or two. But now, anytime the bees increase the honey level inside of the hive, that observer is going to trigger. And the reason we didn't use observers in the honey farm is because the glass bottles inside the dispenser would be spat out as though they were ejected from a dropper if the honey level increased, but it wasn't at 5 and it wasn't ready to harvest the honey yet. However, shears don't do that because they will attempt to shear whatever is in front of them, and if they can't be sheared, they will still remain in the dispenser. So the shears are not going to be spat out at all. So it's quite safe to use an observer for this, even though it's going to output a redstone pulse 5 times before it actually shears the honeycomb from the hive. The shears aren't going anywhere, and they also will not decrease in durability with those extra ticks. So we should be able to transfer a redstone signal from this to that in order to shear the honey when it is ready for production. And the next step really is figuring out how to get the redstone signal from here to the dispenser. We could, of course, build a little redstone wire to go around the corner like this, but there are two things at play here. For a start, you want it to be relatively compact, and there is in fact a way that we can transfer the signal to this dispenser without having to worry about going around a corner like this. We can make it a 1-block wide design, which is actually quite a desirable thing when you have to fit all of this redstone into a tight space. The other thing is sometimes an observer signal will not travel in certain ways. It doesn't always travel up and down blocks, and sometimes it doesn't want to travel the full length of a redstone wire. It just puts out one pulse at the start here, which you could of course boost using a repeater if you have a repeater to extend the signal, or you could use a comparator for the same thing, but that's just going to increase the amount of redstone components and the amount of space the contraption takes up. So what we are going to do is have the observer face downwards into the top of the hive, and we're actually going to have to break the roof out a little bit here because the observer is going to be facing downwards into here, and the redstone signal from it is going to be carried over to the dispenser using another solid block. In this case, we'll use another piece of our yellow terracotta, and we're going to put redstone dust here and here. So the redstone dust will pick up the output from the observer, we'll carry it over to this block here, and that's going to power the dispenser, shearing the hive of its honeycomb. So if we remove all of these placeholder blocks around it, that's actually a very compact and quite neat design, and it should be quite reliable in its shearing of the honeycomb. We might, as you saw, occasionally get a honeycomb spat out to one side or the other, but in that case, it might be best for us to place blocks either side of the hive block there and there. And that's going to prevent the honeycomb from traveling too far to one side without it hitting a solid block. And in the time the game takes to calculate the fact that it's going this way, it's probably going to get picked up by the hopper minecart anyway. And we could maybe surround this with blocks. The bees only need access to the front face of the hive block, remember. So that's going to be nice and easy for them to get in and out that way. And hopefully that should result in a nice, easy honeycomb farm. So now the bees are in the hive. The honey level is currently at 3, meaning once they pop out again, we should see the dispenser fire and the honeycomb should be sheared and put in the chest here. There's nothing in the chest right now, so we should see that start to work in just a second. And there we go. The dispenser popped once, and I think that was our honey. There we go. So let's see what we've got. 3 honeycomb in the chest. Perfect. Let's check on the durability of the shears. As you can see, 203 right now, so I think that's only been using the durability when it shears the honeycomb. I will have to check that though. I was a little bit unsure about the durability value of those, but I think that's a pretty successful design. Now, the options we have at this point are just to copy this design over by 1 block, or to attempt to make the design tileable. And in this case, tileable means having it side by side with no gaps in between, meaning that we could effectively have a hive on every block horizontally from here. And I don't think I'm going to attempt that. The main reason for that being the hopper minecarts are a little bit temperamental when you put them side by side, especially because when you are putting them on rails, they can change position slightly based on the direction of the rails, and that's not really something we want, because once we put two hopper minecarts next to each other on a rail like this, they're going to start to collide, their positions will shift around a little bit, and it will become increasingly difficult to keep them in the spaces we want them. You could potentially have a whole row of hopper minecarts working underneath here if you wanted to, or potentially if you wanted to rely on the honeycomb only getting collected in a certain area, you could have a hopper minecart running up and down underneath that, collecting it up as you went. But for now, I think I'm going to be happy just having these designs spaced out by one block each time. It's going to be a little bit less hassle that way. And of course, if we wanted to, we could set up a whole hopper chain leading into a single output chest from a bunch of individual modules of this design. So I think we're going to give that a go. Let's build up a few more of these in this area. And you know what? I think this place feels like a nice open space where we could build a more permanent beekeeping site. Somewhere there's a little bit of open space. It's away from the town. As far as the lore of the world goes, it works pretty well. There you go. Let me just quickly check the sheer durability. Yes, still 203, even though the dispenser just fired twice. So that isn't using up any durability in the meantime. That's good to know, because I was a little bit worried there for a second. So now I've removed all the glass, and I want to monitor the bees' behavior a little bit to see if they end up flying too far afield. I have removed most of the flowers within a certain radius of this area just to make sure that they don't get distracted looking for these oxeye daisies or dandelions over here. But it does seem like once they get attached to certain flowers, they like to socialize around them quite regularly, and they'll all go to the same flower. This is part of the bees' kind of gossip sharing system, kind of like the way villagers share gossip, I suppose, but it basically means that they will return to the same flowers and share the locations of good flowers with their friends. Now, why has that not sheared correctly? That should all have been set up normally. I wonder what's happened there. Well, we can trigger the dispenser manually like that. Oh, that's why I haven't put any shears in that one. Thank goodness. I was worried that that was going to be a bit of a problem. But yeah, I've only just set up these other modules. We put shears in all three of those, and of course, forgot the one at the end. Well, now we can shear that manually. The honeycomb should go in the chest right away. I can take that button off, and yeah, it's always nice to have fail-safes like that just in case. Hello, pig. Welcome along. Yes, so we've got a whole bunch of honeycomb starting to gather in these chests in little clumps of 3, which is absolutely perfect. I think that will be totally fine, and we can just have a row of hoppers along the side here, outputting to a chest on this side if we wanted to, just to make sure everything gets collected up in individual places and that we aren't jostling with the bees to disturb them a little bit. We could probably build row upon row of these if we wanted to as well. Once again, the thing to keep in mind is how many entities there are in the area. You don't want tons and tons of bees in the same place. It's going to lag out the world a whole bunch if you have a bunch of them here, and you only have 3 bees per hive, so you need to use these a little bit carefully. And one of the things you have to bear in mind is that the resources you're getting from farms like this need to be acquired over time, so it's best to be patient with these things and wait for them to produce results. In this case, I think the result is pretty great, and I'm really happy with this little honeycomb farm design. We could do a whole bunch of other stuff with this as well, and it's not quite going to be the redesign for the honey farm that I was looking for, but don't worry, because we've got another one of those coming up very soon. Thank you folks so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care, bye for now.